Just as a courtesy reminder, can everybody make sure to turn their phones off? Just double check your ringers and alarms. Thank you, yes.
How many contenders do you guys have?
3.
Violet, are you here?
I'm here. What's up, boss?
I think our mic is low on batteries.
There's another mic right underneath.
Probably go no.
Yeah,
Backup.
we used the mic last week. Yeah, that's true. We may not need it. Speak up. We're pretty out on the mic.
I think
You good? Just project.
All right. Well, the topic of debate is this House supports a government-mandated halt of giant AI experiments. Judges, the info slide is that giant AI experiments include but are not limited to large language models like GPT-4. Other AI labs are currently also developing much more ambitious projects that are much larger than those of OpenAI, the creators of Dall-E 2 and ChatGPT. I won't belabor the point. I won't try and impress on you the significance of what you're about to see. I won't waste time with fine words because I'm sure that anything I could say will be blown away by what these 4 debaters are about to say to you. So, let's begin the final round of NPDL-TOC 2025.
Should we start off with introductions before we get going? For the affirmation, my name is Nate Baumsey. I'm going to be the first speaker for Nueva.
Yeah, my name is Carson Middleton. I'll be the second speaker on the affirmation from Nueva.
My name is Austin Gordon. I will be the first and third speaker for the opposition from Dalton.
And I'm Campbell Langdon. I'll be the second speaker from the op from Dalton.
Alright, if everyone's ready, my speech is going to start on my first word. Because it is fundamentally dangerous and irresponsible to gamble with the future of humanity, I urge an affirmation ballot on the resolution this House supports a government-mandated halt of giant AI experiments. To start off by defining what exactly a giant AI experiment is. It's broadly recognized, as the info slide tells you, as artificial intelligence systems that are more advanced than ChatGPT-4, which is widely recognized as the current best AI system. These are almost always language models, although there are a couple other niche examples to be provided. Now, to be clear, most beneficial use of artificial intelligence that we know of in the status quo is pretty clearly excluded from this definition. Things like using AI for cancer treatments or for protein folding are all things that we know how to do and we're able to accomplish with existing systems. What's unique about giant AI is that they approach the point of artificial general intelligence, where artificial intelligence has a higher amount of intelligence and a higher capability to function than even the most well-educated human beings. Specifically, the affirmation in this round is advocating for the demand of the Future of Life Institute's Pause Giant AI Experiments open letter, which asks for a 6-month government-mandated ban on giant AI experiments. Now, I know that this might seem like a short time, but it's actually really significant for a couple of reasons. It allows for evaluation and regulation, specifically without external pressure, i.e., every day it seems AI companies are unveiling some new model or some new development. When you pause that development, you allow government the space to actually step in and regulate without fear of backlash because they're stopping new models in the status quo when there isn't that development going on concurrently. This particular letter that we are advocating for the passage of has been signed by 30,000 people, mostly artificial intelligence researchers and industry CEOs like Yoshua Bengio, the creator of neural networks, Stuart Russell, a leading professor of computational science, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, and the author Yuval Noah Harari. To get into our 3 contentions,
POC pause time.
Yeah.
Is this in a nation specifically or just generally in the world?
This is broadly speaking, the resolution doesn't specify a nation. We're assuming that this is all governments around the world. Our first contention is about misinformation. Specifically, that artificial intelligence allows for the instantaneous communication of misinformation that destroys public trust and ruins elections and democracy. Advanced models of artificial intelligence can create deepfakes and propaganda that would take a human months in a matter of seconds. Now, as of right now, the artificial intelligence tools that we have create deepfakes that are still mostly recognizable. Spiralytics found that 57% of people can correctly identify artificial intelligence deepfakes right now. But that's dropping significantly over time as these models get better and better and are able to produce more and more advanced images. Furthermore, this means that it's way cheaper to produce these kinds of images. Russia had to spend $300 million to use human labor to interfere with elections in the United States and Europe, but now they can do that with just thousands. It's simply an open source tool that has the power to upend democracy. And then furthermore, artificial intelligence, when used this way, allows for the diversification of actors and targets. That you allow for other countries that don't have a $300 million budget to interfere with elections to go into other sovereign nations and drastically interfere with their democracies. This means that small regional actors can begin igniting hotspots over these kinds of conflicts that aren't possible when you have to spend $300 million to interfere with an election. Even if the US is safe right now, other nations aren't. We have to be evaluating the impacts to the entire world. We have to be looking at how everyone suffers from the use of these tools, especially those that we do not traditionally talk about in this space. Artificial intelligence creates a network of global instability, especially for those in areas with lower media literacy who are less well equipped to, for example, identify these deepfakes. Our second contention is about automation, and this one's pretty intuitive. Better artificial intelligence doesn't just allow for more automation, it allows for automation in a completely different type of job than we've seen automation occurring in before. Specifically, automation in the status quo has mostly been limited to low-skill jobs, factory jobs, where it's easy for robots to take over. And even with our most advanced AI models, we're only seeing the replacement of, customer service jobs or sales jobs that AI can pretty easily offset with a pretty low level of knowledge. But with giant AI experiments approaching artificial intelligence has the capability to upend all even high-skilled jobs. That's why McKinsey and Company says that there will be 400 to 800 million jobs lost as a result of automation and AI by just 2030. These are not low-skilled jobs that can be easily replaced. These are high-skilled jobs, and this job reduction is explicitly permanent, because you can't shift from a high-skilled job replaced by AI to another high-skilled job that can also just be replaced by AI. And specifically, this also destroys our infrastructure of education, because we reduce the incentive for people to go to college if they can't get a job with a college degree that's any better than what they would get otherwise. Which means this also leads to the same harms around electoral democracy that I was describing in our first contention. That when artificial intelligence is used in such a way that it disincentivizes people from actually going to spaces where they learn about the world and learn about how civics works, then you prevent the ability to actually engage with systems in this constructive manner. Our third contention is about energy and water use. AI training requires huge amounts of power and cooling, as does just the use of artificial intelligence. And bigger and more advanced models require more. I think this is pretty intuitive. You're spending more time and more resources training them. To provide a brief scale or a brief example of the scale of difference between less and more advanced AI models, the difference between ChatGPT-3, which required 2 to 15, somewhere between 2 and 15 million liters of water to develop, ChatGPT-4, the next model, required 10 times more. When we're building more and more advanced waters, we need exponentially more resources in order to provide them. Similarly, GPT-4 also required double the energy use as ChatGPT-3. So these models are often developed, and the data centers that house these models and use energy and water are often located in poor rural areas around the world that do not have the infrastructure or the political ability to oppose them. Just last year, Microsoft announced a $1 billion investment in a data center in Kenya. And this water usage directly takes away from local communities, the vast majority of whom rely on this water for their agriculture, which means both their livelihood, their subsistence, as well as their actual physical survival. There are millions of people around the world who will lose access to water, lose access to the water that provides them with a job, and lose access to the water that provides them with a life, with the expansion of AI data centers that is necessary for giant AI experiments to occur. So for all those reasons, I urge an affirmation ballot. good? Okay, time begins now. Let's start top of case on the opposition's counterplan here. What we propose is essentially that an international regulatory body for AI with participants from all countries be created to implement regulations as AI progresses. We think this is legitimately fiatable on the opposition side. The reason why we say this is because fundamentally Gov is proposing the same thing. They're telling you that there's going to be a 6-month international halt on AI, and in that time there's going to be huge regulatory efforts everywhere. But insofar as individual countries have no reason to regulate if other countries don't, because they then fall behind in the AI race, and no current international regulation body exists, we think their plan implicitly requires one. So what we're going to do is basically have that body exist in the long term, but we're just not going to have the halt. Then onto some quick claims that they have here top of case. They tell you that all good is excluded by the new kinds of AI that are being created because they're just trying to make AI smarter than humans. We think this just logically doesn't make sense. If AI is smarter than people, if AI is super smart, then it can be used to solve really difficult problems. Obviously, if AI gains the ability to outthink people, then it can also outthink people in researching cancer or green energy solutions. Don't buy this argument that there's just no good coming from AI. Then onto the second overview they give you of no backlash. We think this just isn't true. AI corporations aren't going to want to sit around for just 6 months and allow a ton of regulation to happen because it's inevitably going to cut into their profit margins and their ability to accelerate. Many AI executives and people that lead the space follow what's known as effective accelerationism, which basically believes that you have to accelerate AI as fast as possible to reach some massive utopia. These people believe in AI, they have tons of money, and they've shown the ability to influence governments. That's why Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos stood behind Trump rather than his cabinet. Let's get on to opposition's case. Why do you prefer regulation over time? Why do you prefer our counterplan? We have a few different key reasons here. The first one is that AI is improving at such an unbelievably fast rate, as Gov tells you, that we cannot possibly regulate and account for what AI is going to be in the future right now. Right now, all AI can do is summarize some information and write my English essays, but it can't actually change the way that the world works. As AI progresses, we need to continue regulating over time. We also think that new scenarios and applications are constantly developing. If we create regulation for large language models right now, we don't know how that's going to affect things in the future. The second key warrant as to why you prefer regulation over time is because the amount of regulation that will come during their 6-month period is probably almost nothing. There are incredible amounts of government bureaucracy. It is incredibly difficult for even any individual country to pass sweeping AI regulations. That's why not one nation has done it. And when the effort has to become internationalized, and they literally only have 6 months of regulation to solve any problem, the amount of regulation they're actually going to be able to get passed is going to be unbelievably minimal. You prefer having this international body that exists long into the future to continue regulating for a longer time as we learn more about AI and as AI grows. The third key reason is because we want younger people to be involved with AI, not older people. The majority of world leaders right now are people we've seen the videos of people in Congress asking the TikTok CEO what Wi-Fi is. These people don't understand what AI is. They don't know how to regulate it. We think that it's really important that we have younger people in the space that grow up as AI does, rather than a bunch of really old people right now deciding everything for the future. What are the impacts? We think that fundamentally this turns a really large amount of gov case. Yes?
Wouldn't an international regulatory body chosen and approved and necessarily supported by the governments of the world feature similar kinds of people to those that are currently serving on the governments of the world?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, in the status quo, it's going to have very similar people. But what we're saying is that as time moves on, younger people that have grown up with AI and understand it better will be more involved with the space. Impacts here. Fundamentally, this turns a huge amount of gov case. What they're telling you is that we need to halt AI and regulate it, otherwise a ton of bad things happen. We tell you, you get more regulation when you vote for op, and so therefore that's really, really good. We also think that the biggest problem here with gov's plan is that it creates a huge veil of solvency where people feel like we did this 6-month halt, we did a bunch of regulation, so we don't have to do anything else. And not only does it create that veil for people, but it's also a really, really easy piece of rhetoric for governments to use when they're bought and paid off by tech companies who don't want them to do any more regulation in the future. They can point to this halt and say, hey, we did enough. We don't care if you all lose your jobs. Now onto our second contention, which is going to be on innovation. We think that on the ops side, you always get more access to innovation, you always get there faster. We tell you clearly that there's going to be a 6-month halt on AI, and AI is exponentially increasing, which essentially means that AI research is always going to be 6 months behind in gov as it is opposed to op. What is AI capable of doing? We think that AI is capable of doing really, really important things, for example, for green energy, solving new energy solutions, also developing new medical research. And especially given the fact, no thank you, and especially given the fact that we are really quickly approaching the point of no return for climate change. I think it's like 2030 or something like that at this point. We need to develop these solutions as fast as possible. We think that insofar as on our side, the world is 6 months ahead of Gov's world. That means that millions of people aren't going to die in a 6-month span because of cancer, because AI will now have developed a treatment that can actually save their life. We also think this gives us a much better chance of never meeting that point of no return on climate change, which means that we can develop into a new world that isn't going to be destroyed by climate change. This is really, really important. We do not want our world to be 6 months behind, because in any 6-month span, millions and millions of people die because of causes that AI can fundamentally prevent. Let's get onto the government's case. The first point here that comes on the Gov case is going to be on bad elections. We think there's a few key things to note here. First of all, there's a ton of misinformation already occurring in the status quo. We think that AI solves back for a lot of this. When you go on ChatGPT, you get a kind of big breakdown of information that gives you links, it gives you sources. It's actually really good. But if you go on Twitter, you're probably going to hear that the Holocaust never happened. We think one is better than the other fundamentally. There's a ton of misinformation in the status quo that AI can really help us solve back for, because it provides relatively unbiased educational access. We think you can also just turn this contention. You're seeing on our case that you prefer to have regulation in the long term, and as AI becomes more powerful and becomes more capable of creating deepfakes, we need to be able to regulate it in the moment rather than trying to predict what it's going to be like in the future now and regulate accordingly. Yes?
What actual enforcement power does this international regulatory body have?
I mean, I think it's essentially like a policy suggestion to every country. So what's going to happen is this international body creates regulation, and then essentially because every country is in the body, they participated in creating the regulation, so they're going to enforce it. I also, I don't know if there's going to be some weird argument run against this, but I fundamentally imagine that they have the same program in mind. Okay, let's continue. Now onto the government's second contention about automation. We think this is actually kind of a good thing. Obviously, technology, whenever it's created, takes a lot of jobs, but the world fundamentally recovers. The internet took a ton of jobs away from people. Everybody working at white pages was probably sad, but overall, the internet has eroded poverty across the world and actually been a good thing. The human condition has never been more positive than it is today, and every single time that technology is developed, there is always backlash, there is always fear, but it always ends up being positive. They tell you that all of these high-skilled jobs are going to go away, but fundamentally, we can imagine a world in which AI is doing a lot of the work for us. If AI is now able to automate all farms and basically make all of that happen on its own as efficiently as possible, then there's no real reason why people need to pay for food, because there's going to be enough food for everybody. It is very possible. We think that, no thank you, it's protected time. We think that in a world in which AI is capable of literally taking away everyone's job, then it's also capable of providing for all of the needs that humanity has. If you're able to be a lawyer and understand complex Supreme Court cases, you can probably tell me how to grow some bread or wheat. Whoa. Yeah, automation is good. And now we're going to move on to the government's third contention, which is on climate change. They're telling you that AI is taking up a ton of water, it's really bad for resources. The first key response here is that they just don't solve. 6 months of halting AI isn't actually going to be able to prevent climate change, because AI is just going to pick up once again right after the 6-month period is over and start wasting all of our water once again. We also think that in the long term, you just fundamentally prefer the side here, because AI solves climate change effectively by producing green energy solutions. We're not going to be able to solve climate change by stopping one waste of water for a 6-month period of time, and we think that you get to good green energy solutions 6 months faster on our side, which gives you a better chance of meeting the point of no return. Honestly, this is just not a winning argument for Gov. For all these reasons, could not be prouder to oppose. Thank you.
Okay. In order.
That's all I have to say.
The order will be counterplan, off case, gov case. My name is Carson Middleton. My time will begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All of our opponent's offense derives from this counterplan, which is neither mutually exclusive nor even solvent for the issues that they claim. Before I address this counterplan, I'd like to frame a little bit what a counterplan actually means and how you should evaluate it. A counterplan only gives them offense, it only gives them any ground in this round if it actually is a mutually exclusive to our world, and if it gives them unique benefits. But the key reason this counterplan completely fails is we can do both this counterplan and our own plan, and that is even better than if we had just done this counterplan. Let's explain why. Our plan is to impose a government-mandated halt. Their counterplan is to impose an international regulatory body. What we're telling you is that if we do both at the same time, this is uniquely good because then that international body has more of a buffer, has more time to actually address the issues caused by AI. If we only do the counterplan, then what's just going to happen is this international body can't actually accomplish anything because AI and giant AI experiments are moving too quickly for it to actually solve. So for these reasons, we should be doing both of these at the same time. This gives them no offense. Yes?
Do you guys propose like halting again at some future time, like at repeated intervals or anything like that?
No, but we give 6 months for this regulatory body to actually deal with the impacts of AI without being rushed. Okay. But fundamentally, there's also a major reason why this specific counterplan doesn't actually work within the context of the round is that it's purely inefficient. Our opponents do not give any particular bright line for how this will actually be efficient or how this will not just fall into the same regulatory traps as every single other agency. Specifically, this agency will probably be composed of a lot of representatives from nations that are old and that have little to no expertise with artificial intelligence. And so what that means is this is just going to be inefficient, it's going to lead to, and it's not going to actually solve for any of their impacts. Speaking of their impacts, let's go to their case. The first contention is all about the benefits to their counterplan. You can, again, cross-apply our case. Okay, first of all, they're telling you that in this 6-month pause, very little will actually happen due to the bureaucracy. But we're telling you this is fundamentally untrue. Even if maybe in the United States not much will happen, in the world, it absolutely will. Because governments like France are going to impose AI regulation. Specifically, the EU is known as the hub of regulation. It is known for its regulatory power. Sure.
Given that like the United States is not only the most powerful country in the world, but also the spearhead of AI research, would you not imagine that they are going to have like primary control over what this
okay.
is?
We're going to talk about what will happen in the United States. We're just giving you this very clean example of the EU first. So the EU absolutely has solvency. They will regulate. And specifically, it's better for them to regulate within the pause, within the buffer that we give you, so that they have time to actually adapt. Okay. And then also in the United States, we access benefits as well, because specifically this 6-month pause does more than just allow for regulation. It allows for the public to actually catch up with the hype train on AI. This is a key point throughout this round. Right now, there's a lot of unsubstantiated hype on AI and a lot relating to AI that is not actually backed up by public sentiment. If we impose a 6-month plan, then we can actually have discussions that occur in more than just the government that will allow people to actually understand the impacts of AI and take better action, and also will breed future generations of policymakers to do the same. Also, it will force these giant AI experimenters to actually divert their attention inwards to projects like GPT-4 that actually do have more benefits in the status quo. These projects have more proven benefits and aren't purely experimental and also consume substantially less energy. Also, a key point under this first contention is that if these governments won't be able to actually regulate, as you say, then this international committee won't be able to regulate either if you have so many different nations that they're coming together and it's just going to achieve gridlock. Then they give you this point about it's empowering young people, but fundamentally, this is just going to source from the same older generations that every other government is composed of. They don't give you any particular reason why young people would be included in this international committee. In fact, as we claim, they claim that as time goes on, it would get younger, but no, we just see that the older generations get older and then new old people are joining these committees. The counterplan is literally just a suggestion. If AI executives are in the government, they'll just reject the suggestions. And so fundamentally, this fails. Let's get to their second contention on innovation. Their first response I want to really be highlighting here is they tell you that AI is good for green energy. Yet they don't explain in any particular measure how this is actually good for green energy. We have statistics about how AI could account for over 10% of global energy demand by the year 2050. We give you statistics of how AI is causing, and particularly giant AI experiments, are causing massive energy sucks in the status quo. They don't respond to this. They also, they claim they'll solve for climate change, but fundamentally we solve better for climate change. Even if you don't think we can make this technology better and more energy efficient, you're still buying that we at least have 6 more months. And given the fact that climate change is on a brink, given the fact that we'll all go extinct by the end of the century, it's uniquely crucial that we have a delay delay here, so all these emissions are at least not emitted in the next 6 months. Let's go to GovCase. Okay. Our first contention was on misinformation. Their top-level response here, and only real response, is that this is non-unique. There are other sources of misinformation in the world, but we're telling you that AI, and particularly giant A models that allow for more sophisticated bots and more sophisticated AI attacks, are particularly going to lead to more misinformation. We've seen this example. We've seen how Russian bots have used these more advanced technologies to actually proliferate proliferate misinformation. Then they give you this really interesting response about how AI is actually better for misinformation because you can check ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is generally accurate. First of all, that's not entirely true. ChatGPT is not always accurate. It frequently lies, and that's simply because it's just hallucinating together a response that doesn't actually have a clear, coherent theme. But even if you buy that AI is telling the truth, that's not actually the mechanism of solvency. In fact, what's happening here is that people are seeing this misinformation on social media platforms like Twitter, like Instagram, that is perpetuated by giant AI models. We saw during the 2024 election how people were generating clips of Kamala Harris saying slurs, and that was only possible due to these giant AI models that allow for more complexity, more realism, extend all our points about how AI is getting more realistic. On this contention about automation, they tell you that it's fundamentally good if people lose their jobs because it can solve for the goods of humanity. First of all, I think you're just going to be flowing on this point that because of profit incentives in the world, because of corporate motivations, this good is fundamentally not going to be as utopian as they would suggest. In fact, we see that probably more developed countries are going to be sacrifice zones. Also, they say the automation is good because people don't have to work, but they ignore how many people will actually lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods in the process. And that particular solvency deficit in the short term is what's going to win us the round. And you can extend all my partners' analysis. But now I really want to go, and you can also see that AI is uniquely permanent, and that's another key point here. Unlike other previous technologies, so you're not buying that. On the third contention, I think this is where we're really winning the debate, because they're telling you this 6-month delay won't actually solve for climate change. Again, Judge, this 6 months at the very least gives us more time for because it lowers emissions in the short term from these AI models. But we're saying that it'll do even more than that because it'll allow regulation and companies to actually develop more energy efficient models. It's in the interest of these companies to develop. I'm in protected time to develop energy efficient technologies. It's just they need the time to do so, and this will enable it through the pause. And fundamentally, then they tell you that AI solves climate change. We've given you so many responses at this point. Make them stand up in their next speech and tell you what specific mechanisms these giant AI models are actually solving climate change. We see no tangible impacts, and for those reasons, you're voting affirmative.
All right, is anybody not ready? Great, off time, order is gonna go top of clay case, responding to all the counterplan stuff. I think I'm gonna go two main overviews, and then off in order government order. Right? Any questions?
Where do you want the overviews?
Just throw them at the top. You can start my time in 3, 2, 1. The beginning of the MG is an attempt at a permutation saying that we shouldn't do just the counterplan. The problem is, Austin and I, throughout this round, are going to argue why doing uniquely the counterplan is better than doing both the counterplan and the plan that the government itself institutes. Insofar as we're going to tell you, the CP by itself is always going to be comparatively better. We don't think this perm actually works at all. Next, on this idea about how there's going to be more of a buffer time. I don't know, 6 months, as they themselves tell you, doesn't seem like that much time. And then in the first Gov speech, they tell you, oh, but we're going to explain why this means so much. And they never actually do that. I'll get into that why the 6-month time period loses them the round in a little bit, but keep that in mind. Lastly, on this idea of inefficiency and how there's still going to be old heads in our world. The point that Austin makes that really isn't responded to by the MG is the fact that we have long-term solvency. The Gov plan is a one-time thing. Austin asks a POI, or a POC rather, the MG responds, this is a one-time 6-month pause. All you're getting on the Gov is one time right now, you're getting 6 months to do regulation. Comparatively, on our side of the flow, what you get is a body that is continually going to try to do regulation into the future forever, which means that eventually younger individuals will take over that, as older people get phased out. That's just how things work. with that, 2 overviews. One, we're going to assume that AI is always going to become better than humans. Gov themselves implicitly does this in their innovation point, but I just want to make it really, really clear. AI is going to become better than humans. That's really important. And the second overview that I just want you to keep in mind throughout this debate is on the idea of the AI companies having this idea of AI accelerism, which is that we need to develop AI as fast as we can. The MG doesn't respond to this adequately. You're going to be flowing this through. I'll get into why this is so important in just a second. But now on Op 1 on regulation. First, on the response of like old people are still going to be leading this efforts in our world. Cross by what I told you earlier, insofar as we have long-term solvency, this thing exists for longer periods of time. Eventually, older individuals are phased out, and younger people who grow up with AI are still leading this effort.
POI?
Yes, sure.
Doesn't government work the same way, where eventually older people die and people that grew up in the newer generation become the next generation of government?
No, because your regulatory body happens once. Our regulatory body exists forever. We ask a POC about this. You're only doing 1 6-month pause, one time, having one discussion about regulation entirely. Our advocacy is that you do it forever. That's the delta in this round. Okay, next on this idea about how you're gonna want to pause this to let the public catch up. I don't know. I think this is pretty non-unique. The gov doesn't actually get solvency insofar as the AI can just run away again after their 6-month pause. The only way to actually solve this is with better regulation, which is always going to happen in an op world. Next on the response about how there's going to be, if there's no regulations, then non-unique. We tell you that insofar as the op world always has more time to make regulations, it's always going to be better for us. Why is this going to happen? It's because of Austin's dropped analysis that governments are really, really ineffective. And the second layer that he tells you that Gov doesn't interact with is that if one country doesn't follow the regulations, no countries are going to follow the regulations because they don't want to fall behind in the AI race. So what you have to buy from Gov in order to buy any of their plan is to buy that they're going to somehow convince every single nation in the world to pass unifiable and entire reforms on every single industry. If you don't buy that, then you don't get any of their solvency. Insofar as Austin's analysis gets clean dropped, all nations have to believe in this. So what does this mean? It means, as Austin told you, it's really, really hard to get just one government to agree on AI regulations. It's going to be even harder to get all governments to agree on AI regulations. Insofar as that's the case, you're not going to see regulations coming from the government side of the house. Okay. Last on the response that there's going to direct more attention to the status quo. We tell you that this happens anyways in our world. There's a lot of attention on current AI models, even while we're developing more. This is also not unique. Now on Op 2 on innovation. They basically just say you don't explain how this is the case. But I think we do, and I'll make it even clearer. When AI becomes better than humans at thinking, when it is able to come up with solutions that humans cannot come up with, it can solve problems that humans cannot solve. For example, climate change. Humans do not have a method to, take emissions out of the atmosphere. And I can't tell you for sure if AI is going to be able to do this, but what I can tell you is that there's a non-zero chance, so thank you, insofar as AI is going to become smarter than humans. They tell you this themselves. There's always an increased chance that AI can come up with solutions that humans ourselves can't develop. That's the point of innovation. That's what Austin tells you. That's what isn't responded to. What also is dropped is the analysis that no matter what, innovation is always going to be 6 months behind in a government world, and that 6 months can save thousands, if not millions of lives with innovations in, medical tech, or just general quality of life. We improve people's quality of lives more, and we save more lives objectively in an op world. The MG concedes this. Don't let the PM make a new response. Okay, now on Gov 1 on misinformation. I think they really misinterpret Austin's turn here, which is that misinformation exists in either world, right? You can take the 6-month pause, there's still going to be misinformation. The delta in the round is that these large language models, these giant AI corporations, are really, really accessible, which means that people can use them to find out what is the truth. So if, I see something on Twitter, which I'm gonna see in either world, that is wrong, it is easier for me to figure out that it's wrong if I have access to better AI, which will tell me why it's wrong. This analysis is really poorly handled by the MG, and insofar as that's the case, we think you can turn this pretty easily. But the second response is that even if you don't buy that, we think it's relatively non-unique. We don't really get a mechanism whatsoever from Gov, and it's too late in the round for them to do so, proving how taking a 6-month pause is going to all of a sudden stop misinformation from spreading. What? You can't make images anymore on ChatGPT because we took a 6-month pause. I don't know. It's not explained to us. Don't buy this point because they don't do enough to prove it to you. But even if you do, you can turn this to up. Next on Gov 2 on automation. They basically say that like people are going to lose their livelihood short term. That's really, really bad. The problem is they don't respond to two analyses. One is Austin's analysis on AI accelerationism, which is what he reads to you and what the MG doesn't respond to at all. Insofar as you buy this happens in either world. But the second response is on the outweighing factor. If you buy, once again, that AI is going to become better than humans at like everything, and just thinking in general, what you're always going to have is long-term benefits. Look back to the analysis Austin gave you about how always, when there is innovation in technology, when, I don't know, we were innovating in the factory industry, like automated all of that kind of stuff, yes, people lost their jobs initially, but it always turns out better for their quality of life long-term. That response is conceded. It's really, really important. We're winning on the long term. Sure, we buy that in the short term. Some people will lose their jobs. It doesn't matter insofar as the quality of life for all of society is increased long term. Finally, on Gov 3 about energy. They first ask us, like, how is AI going to solve climate change? But I read this response to you earlier. It's that AI can think of solutions that humans can't. AI can find a way to, I don't know, maybe reverse the effects of climate change, or at least reduce carbon emissions, or take carbon out of the atmosphere, whatever it may be. We don't know, but at least AI has the possibility to solve back this. Insofar as the point of no return is 2030, the only way you possibly stop climate change at that point is through AI. Therefore, I urge you to vote Gov. Thank you.
If you're filling on paper, do a new sheet. I try to be organized, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, is everyone ready? Are you? What are you doing? Okay, sorry. Time starts now. Fundamentally, the way that we see it, Gov is losing this round because they're failing to be generous. They want you to believe in a world in which AI is able to take all of our jobs away, including the hardest and smartest in the world, but it still won't be able to do anything good for us. That's not a world that exists, and therefore you're voting for op. I want to start by highlighting some really important dropped arguments that are going to give you a pretty clear reason to prefer the counterplan to the perm. The first one is on the veil of solvency. I explained to you in LOC that when you do this one-time halt and regulation period, you can easily point back to it and say, hey, look at this, we already did enough, so now we don't have to do anything more. That means that you're not going to be able to get as much regulation out of the international body in a world in which you have this 6-month period than a world in which you don't. The second dropped response, or the second dropped argument, is that prediction is actually bad. We have no way to know what AI is ever going to become, so to try and predict all of it in this regulatory period right now is actually harmful, rather than just trying to evolve with it over time. Then, the other really key argument that they fundamentally drop is these 6 months of pain that don't have to exist in a world in which you do not pause AI's development. They completely leave this off of your flow, that there is going to be a 6-month period of time in our world in which millions of people do not die of cancer because AI has found the solution to it. Don't let them come up here and say, oh, AI doesn't do anything good. You have to believe that AI can do good things if it can take away all of the jobs of the people that do good things in the status quo. Do not believe that. The only other possible reason why you prefer the perm over the counterplan alone is because of this idea that there's going to be like a 6-month pause period where no AI companies are going to be providing any pressure. But fundamentally, Gov drops the argument about effective accelerationism that Campbell reads to you as well. I want to highlight why this is important, because all of these AI executives believe that the path to utopia, to a perfect world, is to accelerate AI as fast as possible, and also they want to make money right now, which means that just because you're pausing for everybody doesn't mean that everybody's going to be okay with it. It means nobody's going to be okay with it, and there's still going to be a ton of pressure. For all these reasons, you're preferring the counterplan over the perm and buying that you get more and better regulation in a world in which you only have the counterplan rather than the perm. Let's talk about the Gov points, compare them to the arguments I've just outlined, and explain to you why none of them are valid reasons to be voting for the Gov. The first argument here is on climate change. Fundamentally, they have failed to address the criticism that you aren't actually going to be able to do anything in this 6-month period, but if you have a 6-month period of time in which AI is able to develop quickly and create green energy solutions, which we've pretty clearly shown you they can do if they become smart enough to take away all of the jobs of the climate scientists who are trying to do that in the status quo. That means that you're going to have a 6-month period of time in this world where there is not nearly as much green energy. We don't think this is a clear win for them. You can also buy Campbell's argument out of MO, where when we have better regulations, that means that we're directing AI research towards better things like climate change, which we've proven to you in the kind of earlier section of my speech and all of Campbell's that you're going to have that. Then on the point of automation, we also don't think this is a valid place for you to vote for Gov because they fundamentally failed to address our arguments that AI automation is actually going to be a good thing. Again, the argument that I gave you in LOC was that you can't believe that there's going to be this world in which AI takes everybody's jobs but isn't able to give us food or do anything positive for us, insofar as they haven't clearly outlined to you and they can't add anything more to this in the PMR about why this automated world is actually really bad. You can't vote for them on it, and even if you would like to, you're still buying us because you understand from the analysis I've just given that you get better regulation in our world than in theirs with the perm, which means that even if you're buying the implicit argument that regulation is the only way to stop mass automation, you're still voting for us because we have better regulation. And then finally, on their last argument about democracy, you're still voting for us because, as I've explained, the counter plan is better than the plan for creating regulation in the long term. And the implicit argument that's within this kind of contention is that better regulation is going to lead to a better democracy, but they haven't actually effectively proven to you why the plan gives you better regulation than the counter plan. And on the other side, we have proven exactly the opposite. For all these reasons, we could not be prouder to oppose. Thank you.
One more time, judges. My name is Nate Bombsey. To provide a brief off-time roadmap, it's going to be explaining why we win and then explaining why we don't lose. Actually, probably the other order. Okay, if everyone's ready, I'm going to start my time in 3, 2, 1 now. Fundamentally, at the point where our opponents concede that it is impossible for a regulatory body that only provides suggestions to actually get any regulation passed. The only world where you have any chance of solving for the harms of artificial intelligence is the affirmation. Let's get into it. Our opponents tell you in their first speech that now we're entering a stage where governments are full of artificial intelligence executives. They give you the example of tech CEOs standing behind Donald Trump at his inauguration instead of his cabinet. Yes, we agree that that's probably true. That's why we need to use our power as the affirmation to feel that the government is actually mandating a pause in AI. They concede what Carson tells you, which is that if this is just a regulatory body that says, hey, we think it might be a good idea if you do this, we think it might be a good idea if you stop making AI that destroys everyone's job, that's probably a bad thing. At the point where AI executives have already infiltrated the government, they're not going to listen. Then, we give you 3 distinct reasons why 6 months is enough time for regulation. The first is about political pressure, that when you stop the news about new AI developments every day, you allow government to make change without fearing backlash.
Point of order, this is new. I think that the argument was made that it allows the public to catch up, but the extension to now that leads to better
No, I'm extending my
policies
PMC argument. I think you guys probably didn't vote, but I'm extending my PMC argument that says that we allow...
No, you can say the argument, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm extending the PMC argument that specifically a 6-month ban allows for evaluation and regulation without public pressure to continue allowing AI to develop.
Discretion, continue.
All right. The second reason that we give is that this specifically encourages them to spend their time on their own internal projects. Our opponents are saying that this happens anyways, but it happens more in a world where they're not distracted by new fancy shiny toys. Then thirdly, my partner tells you that this allows the public to catch up to their hype. They say that AI runs away again after the 6 months. That's the point. We need to have this period to allow the public to understand that AI isn't actually all that it's cracked up to be. So for those reasons, a 6-month pause actually allows for regulation. We believe that this isn't restricted to one country, that this works everywhere. My opponents live so far from the real world that they believe that 800 million people losing their jobs from artificial intelligence is not a big impact because AI is just going to be giving us food and water. But again, they concede my partner's analysis that there is still fundamentally a profit motivation, there is still fundamentally human greed, that there is still fundamentally a reason why people are going to charge money for food and water. At the point where 800 million people can no longer afford to eat and drink, I think it's a pretty obvious ballot for the affirmation there. But furthermore, there's an impact under that that turns everything that they have told you about the 6 months of pain. Specifically, they concede that when people do not have access to high-quality jobs, they stop going to college. If people do not go to college, we don't get any research in the first place. It doesn't matter if they've come up with some fancy new solution to stop climate change if no one knows how to build a solar panel or a wind turbine. Then, they tell you that specifically, our opponents tell you that automation specifically doesn't matter. Again, for all the reasons I've explained, automation very clearly does. This is 800 million people losing their jobs, losing their ability to pay for food. We would say this is probably more significant. My opponent in the MO brings up this argument that maybe one day AI will come up with a way for us to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as some fanciful application. It turns out we already did that. We already invented carbon capture. That's already a tool that we as humans have developed to allow us to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Oh look, humans can in fact innovate. Then, let's talk about misinformation. People don't check artificial intelligence to see if what they're reading on Twitter is true. This is just laughable, and furthermore, people with low media literacy, people in Eastern Europe or Sub-Saharan Africa, are not doing that. At the point where our opponents concede that any actor with $1,000 in their pocket can do what Russia did with 300 million across all of Europe and the United States in 2016 and 2020, then they concede everything we tell you about how this reignites regional hotspots, allows for global chaos, and destroys electoral democracy, because again, anyone with $1,000 can create a misinformation campaign that today would cost 300 million. But finally, the clearest and cleanest ballot for the affirmation is in our third contention about energy and water. Again, 6 months is enough time for us to regulate, and at the point where in the status quo, technology companies are investing billions of dollars in the creation of data centers in areas where they are siphoning hundreds of millions of gallons of water from millions of people who rely on this water, not just to literally quench their thirst, but also to provide them with an income, to provide them with subsistence. It is an easy ballot for the affirmation. This impact goes cleanly conceded. They concede our analysis that more advanced artificial intelligence systems require more energy and more water, and fundamentally that this takes place in places that cannot protest against it. So because the negation prevents everyone from going to college, takes away 800 million jobs and livelihoods, and prevents millions of people from having access to the food and water they need to survive, I think it is obvious that you are voting for the affirmation to choose not to gamble with the fate of humanity.
Hold on, guys.